persistence and hard work and stick-with-itness over the past few years. So it's really a testament to the county and to her that she was able to flip this district by a substantial margin. And so I'd like to welcome, I don't think I see her, Representative Kristen Senate. So my Sunday has been full of golf and beer, which is a fabulous way to spend a Sunday. But it gets even better when we get an opportunity to welcome a presidential candidate here. And so before I introduce our special guest tonight, I just also want to echo a big thanks to Brian Fox for hosting this gathering tonight. I also want to say thank you so much to Sean and Judy for all they're doing. They are such wonderful advocates for Democrats in Polk County, and they are working so hard and will continue to work hard for the next year and beyond. And then I also want to thank all of you for coming out and listening and asking questions and supporting all of the good men and women who are spending a lot of time and effort here in Iowa in hopes of becoming the next leader of our country. And I think we are all in agreement that new leadership is critical. So with that, I want to tell you about the most recent candidate to join the group of those running for president. Representative Tim Ryan is from Ohio's 13th district. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2002. His primary focus is on improving the economy and quality of life. He is the author of A Mindful Nation, How a Simple Practice Can Help Us Reduce Stress, Improve Performance, and Recapture the American Spirit, and The Real Food Revolution, Healthy Eating, Green Groceries, and the Return of the American Family Farm. Representative Ryan is a member of the House Appropriations Committee and serves as co-chair of the Congressional Addiction Treatment and Recovery Caucus, and is a member of the Bipartisan Task Force to Combat the Heroin Epidemic. He also serves as co-chair of the Congressional Manufacturing Caucus. Before his election to Congress, Representative Ryan served in the Ohio State Senate. He began his career in politics as a congressional aide in 1995. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a warm West Des Moines welcome to Representative Tim Ryan.
That was a really big deal in Youngstown, Ohio. reason I'm running is because for the last 40 years, areas like the ones that I come from and the ones I represent have not been plugged into the global economy. There's been a lot of growth. People say that there's been all this aggregate wealth created, and not a lot of it has come to the communities that I represent. And this isn't like a new phenomenon. We could go back to the late 1970s when Youngstown Sheet and Tube closed down, and we lost tens of thousands of jobs across what's known as the Mahoning Valley, across the greater Youngstown area. And that was really the beginning of the unraveling. My father-in-law, Andrea's dad, actually hung on to one of the thread mill there when Youngstown Sheet and Tube closed for a couple years. But then he lost his job. He was out of work for about 13 months. Had just bought a house. Andrea was just born. Did I give away your age? Sorry. But Andrea was just born, and they had just bought a house, and he just borrowed $4,000 from his parents and had no clue what they were going to do. And you can go back about 20 years. My cousin, Donnie, worked at a local factory that supplied the electronics for General Motors. We had a big General Motors plant. And in the 90s, I never forget, maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, he called me up and he said, "You're never going to believe what I just had to do." It was one of his last days at work. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "I had to this is one of my last jobs. I had to unfold the machine from the factory floor. I had to put it in a box, and I had to ship it to China." That was 20 years ago. And we can go back to just a few weeks ago when our daughter called me from school in tears saying, she was crying. I said, "Fella, what's the matter?" And she said, her friend, her dad just lost his job at the local General Motors factory. And the daughter was upset because they had to move. And so she was crying to my daughter, and my daughter was crying to me. And she said, "You've got to do something." Now, I'm not here to say at that moment I decided I was going to run for president, but I will tell you this. This has been going on for 40 years in large swaths of the American economy. And the average person has not seen a raise in almost 30 years. A real raise where you actually have more money in your pocket. Trying for health care, trying to have a secure pension. And I will just tell you, when I came to Iowa last week, and I was in rural Iowa, and I was hearing about farmers who hadn't made a profit in 5 years because of ag policy and trade policy and climate change and all of the other issues. It's dawning on me, as it's probably dawning on you, that there is a coalition out in our country that is ready to come together, where the economy's not working for them, the healthcare system's not working for them, we're tired of the climate issues not being addressed, the criminal justice system is not working for them. And I'm running for the highest office in the land because I believe, coming from where I come from, having my experiences over the last 45 years, my family working in factories, in the unions, and plumbers, and pipe fitters, and small business people, that maybe, just maybe, a real working class person, not a fake working class person, who gets the power that the people give the President of the United States, and walks into that Oval Office every single morning thinking about the concerns, the worries, the heartache, the pressure that the average American family is going through every single day. And I'm telling every one of you, and I will continue to tell you over the next several months, that working class issues are in my heart, in my mind, in my bones. My grandfather was a steel worker. I heard the stories about the Depression and the war and going to the moon and what we can do when we come together. But we are so divided today that we can't get anything done. We can't fix the economy, we can't fix the healthcare system, we can't fix the environment, we can't fix the criminal justice system because we're so divided. And you have my commitment that I will walk into that office every single day and I will pull those levers for people who work hard, for people who play by the rules, and just want to get ahead. Okay? I'm going to tell you one quick story, and then I'd be happy to open it up for questions. This is really my first presidential event here, so I'm not sure exactly what the procedures are, but I'm happy to stick around and take questions. When we first got married, I had a house. We both lived on little towns outside of Youngstown. She's from Struthers, a little mill town outside of Youngstown. I'm from Niles, small little town, just a little bit north of Youngstown. And so when we got married, we had to find some neutral territory. And so we moved and we got a house and we had kids and eventually we had Brady and a couple of dogs. And so one of these nights I actually got control of the remote to watch TV. Everybody was upstairs in bed, probably the same bed, but that's a whole other story. And I started flipping through the TV stations. And so here's a guy, old quarterback from Youngstown, Ohio. He's going to try to find a sports channel, right? And I couldn't find anything on sports-wise, but I found a documentary about the old college basketball coach, Jimmy Valvano. And I'm half Italian, so I grew up loving Jimmy Valvano. And Jimmy V is given this speech, and he says, I'll never forget it, he said, God must have loved ordinary people because he made so many of us. He said, but every day, ordinary people do extraordinary things. He said, in every day, in every single way, ordinary people do something extraordinary. That is the underlying value of my campaign. That's why my wife teaches. That's why I'm in politics. That's why we're here in Iowa. And that's why I'm running for president. I will have an agenda that will be based on the value of we need to help ordinary people do something extraordinary. We have so much talent. We have creativity. We have imagination. And what this country lacks today is opportunity. And the government's responsibility is to make sure, not that you win the race, but that you get to the doggone line to at least get in the race. And we have stiff competition today. Russia's coming after us. They're trying to divide us. If there's a cultural rift in the United States on social media, Russia comes in with thousands of bots to try to continue to put us in our boxes so we could never come together, so we could never be unified. And China stands behind them, ready to wipe us out economically. Ready to wipe us out. And what we have to do is come together. Russia and China want to clean our clock. China has 1.4 billion people. We have 330 million. I'll leave you with this. We have got to reinvest in the United States. Our education system, our infrastructure, our healthcare, so that we can be a competitive country. We can be an innovative country. It's not just about tariffs with China. It's about out-competing them on all fronts. And that means no child left behind. That means everybody has opportunity in the United States. And as president, I will challenge every person to work hard and take advantage of that opportunity. That's our commitment, our obligation. And this will not be easy. I'm not promising anybody a quick fix. I'm not a superstar. I'm not a savior. I will tell you, I will jump in the foxhole with you, and we will get this done. We are smart enough. We are creative enough. We are courageous enough to pull this off. But it will be a long slog, but we can do it together. And as Bobby Kennedy said at the end of many of his little campaign stops, in that brief campaign, I do not promise you ease. I do not promise you comfort. But I do promise you these: weariness, hardship, and sacrifice. And with these, I promise you victory. Thank you for having me.
The school shootings have really concerned me, and even more concerned of having teachers have a gun. As a teacher, I certainly wouldn't have wanted to have a gun. So I would like to know, and then that isn't even the big issue. Every day, we don't hear about it, but 100 are killed by guns. So I would like to ask you what the priority would be, and would it, to do something about gun violence, and would it be on your first 100 days?
Thank you so much. And I think I have a teacher in the family that would agree she's not going to be carrying a gun to school. So we're in agreement there. Yes, I will do something in the first 100 days. I think it's very important to at least, the very, very least, and I support all of the bans and background checks and all that, but I would hope that we could get a significant piece of background check legislation within the first 100 days. I would hope. We did it in the House. A few weeks ago, we passed gun control legislation. We have to make this argument. This is, again, about us coming together. When you have 70 or 80% of NRA members that agree on a universal background check, there's really no reason why we can't get it done. And what we've seen happen in our schools, my wife, as I said, is a teacher in our, obviously our 16 and 15-year-old, they go to schools, and Brady, who's 4 and a half, goes to school right down the hall from Andrea. So for all of us, just to imagine those scenarios in our own lives as we each have them, this is something we will do. Thank you.
I'm a senior citizen, and from my Social Security, almost $200 is deducted every month. I pay an additional $200 plus every month for supplemental insurance. So we're not home free on Medicare. My daughter is 50 years old, and I was just visiting her in Montana, and she said to me, "Mother, if they do away with Obamacare, I will no longer be able to," she's self-employed, "I will no longer be able to afford insurance." It is a critical issue in our country that we get health care under control, and it is not run by big pharma, and it's not run by insurance companies. Do you have a plan in mind, or where do we go with health care in this country?
It's a great question, one we hear about all the time where I represent. I am and have been since 2007 on the Medicare for All bill. I believe that that is where we need to work our way towards. I think and I supported the public option during the Obamacare debates and supported Obamacare and helped pass Obamacare. So I'm significantly committed to making sure everybody has coverage. We've got to, we're playing a lot of defense right now with what the Republicans did over the last couple of years and what the president wants to do now. I believe that we need to move towards that public option. We need to figure out what the politics look like of potentially bringing Medicare down to 50 or 55. I like the idea of allowing small businesses to buy into the Medicare program. I think that can be a significant contribution to an more entrepreneurial, more innovative economy where people can take risks because they can get into the Medicare program. And then like Obamacare was set up, where you get credits or help to pay for health care, if you bring it down, you would actually get people to help pay for that coverage. So you would get assistance. You'd be able to get into the program, but you'd also have assistance to pay for it. Let me just expand on this because I think we're really having, in some ways, the wrong conversation around healthcare too. You touched upon it. We basically have a disease care system, not a healthcare system. And we wait till people get absolutely sick and then we cover them. We're not covered. Figure out a way to do it. I believe we spend 2.5 times as much as any other industrialized country on healthcare, and we get the absolute worst results. And part of that is through waste in the system, which we should be, as Democrats, we should certainly be against. We waste about $50 billion a year in waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicare system. That's $1 billion a week. That's a lot of money that we could plow back into the system. We will go for reforms to save money. That money's not going back to Warren Buffett, the tax cut. That's going back into the Medicare system. So we've got to be, as Democrats, we've got to be for running government efficiently. My point is, this is a disease care system, and we pay a lot of money for it. And who stands in the middle of it? The pharmaceutical companies saying, you guys are all having this fight. You're going to do Medicare, you're going to do Medicare for all, you're going to Medicare for more, private insurance, VA, fee-for-service, out-of-pocket. What are you guys going to do? And the pharmaceutical companies are sitting right in the middle of it going, who wants to pay me? Because I'm getting paid. We've got to crack down on the pharmaceutical industry who uses a lot of public research to get to their products that they then convert over into very highly profitable products, and then they screw the very taxpayer that helped them get off on the public side with the initial public investments. Here's what I said, just quickly. We've got to take this money, we've got to front load it to the preventative side. And I don't think you can have an honest conversation about health care without us as a nation having an honest conversation about health. And I don't think you can have an honest conversation about health until we have an honest conversation in this country about food. And I don't think we can have an honest conversation in this country about food until we have an honest conversation in this country about agriculture. These are all interconnected. How do we pay farmers, one, to sequester carbon, but two, to grow healthy food, to rid ourselves of food deserts and making sure that people have access to healthy food regardless of which zip code you live in the United States. I think that's really important. Half the country today has either diabetes or pre-diabetes. So whatever system we come up with, when a diabetic costs 2.3 times as much as the average person going to the hospital or going to the doctor, we will sink our healthcare system. And so interventions early on the front end, I believe, is a new, better, more efficient way of doing healthcare. Not to mention, it's best for our kids, for them to learn and increase their cognitive function. So that's kind of what I think about this. Yeah.
I read recently where you said that Trump, when it came to the economy, Trump was old school and you were new school. Can you talk about what you mean by a new school economy?
Yes, absolutely. Well, briefly, old school for the president has been, we're going to open up the coal mines, we're going to open up the steel mills. I come from steel country and auto country, and coal country is just down the road, which led to the steel and the auto, as you know. What I've tried to do in my district, Youngstown and Akron, Ohio, from the time I got into the state senate 19 years ago, was think about, we're losing these old industries through automation, trade, whatever it was. What are the new ones that are growing? And I've worked really hard to try to understand that. vehicles, okay? There are 1 to 2 million electric vehicles today. By 2030, there's going to be 30 million electric vehicles. I want those made in the United States, okay? I want the batteries made in the United States. I want the electric charging stations made in the United States. And the charging stations alone are going to be I've got some crazy numbers on this. I've said them publicly. I'm not sure if they're true, but I would just say, multi-trillion dollar industry for charging stations in the next 20, 30 years around the world. I want to make those technologies here. I want to make those products here, and I want to ship them abroad. That's new straight economy. Wind, solar, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, where you're actually printing big industrial-sized parts. Additive's going to create 3 to 5 million new jobs in the next 10 years. Wind and solar are growing at 25 or 30% a year. And they're going to be great for climate. They're going to be great for reversing what's happened over the last 30 years. And we can reverse that. And I believe the number one issue for me is going to be to set up and make sure we articulate an industrial policy in the United States where the president, which will be me, will sit in the White House, will sit in the Oval Office with the business community, with the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, public health folks, infrastructure experts, and we're going to sit down and we're going to say, how do we put this together? I realize I don't have all the answers, but we're going to make 30 million electric vehicles. Someone's going to make 30 million electric vehicles in the next 10 years. How do we make them? And the problem is, you're exactly right. The problem is, right now, China dominates 40% of the electric vehicle market. Right now, China dominates 60% of the solar panel market because we don't have an industrial policy in the United States. That's what I mean by new economy.
In regards to your industrial policy, how do you incentivize businesses which have the primary cost to manufacturing a part being labor? How do you incentivize those companies coming back to the United States without tariffs or any other economic impact?
How do you incentivize businesses to do this in the United States, or
where the primary cost is labor versus
where the primary cost is labor? And that's been the issue over the last 30 years, right? It's been labor costs and automation, where you can do it quicker. So either a robot does it, or they take it offshore for labor, some other workers in some other country to be able to do it. Couple ways to get here. I think you've got to have incentives in the tax code. I think we've got to sit down with the venture capital community. And I think we've got to sit down and figure out how we do what they call a double bottom line, which is a bottom line that just isn't about the profit, but there's another bottom line that's about the social good. And I think this is a model moving forward in the 21st century, that we incentivize through the tax code, whether it's lower rates for companies who do this stuff, who don't just worry about the shareholders, they're concerned with the stakeholders, which means the workers and the environment and the supply chain. That, to me, is worth incentivizing. And I think we can begin to shift the economy around that. And I'm okay with the government helping out around the innovation piece of it. And I think that's going to be really important. We've got to be creative. Here's where the problem is today, in my estimation. We've got, many times, the Democrats say, well, the government can take care of everything, and the Republicans say the government can't do anything. Where I've come from, in every economic development deal we've done in my district, it's been multiple entities there. It's been port authorities, it's been local government, it's been new market tax credits, it's been the local community college to help with training. You got to figure out really how to pool everybody together to make these deals go down. And that's going to mean the tax code, and that's going to mean incentives, but we've got to do research. I'll tell you one quick story. I had President Obama, I can't remember his title, but I had President Obama's top manufacturing officer, something like that. I can't remember what his position was. He told me the story at MIT. MIT got a boatload of money from the public to do research. 150 companies came out of MIT. I don't know if it was over a certain number of years, but 150 companies came out. And the companies, using the public tax dollars, developed products. And then they got over, he told me, $4 billion in outside investment for these 150 companies, 150. And then they couldn't get any other help. They call it the valley of death in investment, economic development. They couldn't get any other help. And so of all of those companies, 100, 150, whatever the number was, every single one of those companies, funded by your tax dollars to develop the technology, left the United States. 70% of them went to China. Where's the Department of Commerce? Where's the National Science Foundation? Where's the tax code? Where's the venture capitalists? We need to build a new model. This old model's broke. And the guy in the White House is talking about coal mines. We lost 30,000 coal jobs in the last 10 years or so. So we need a president who's going to sit down with a bunch of really smart people and say, how do we build this new model? And it's got to include the private sector. We are not going to get there without the profit motive and the incentives. We can be hostile to greed. We can be hostile to inequality. We can be hostile to concentration of wealth. We cannot be hostile to a free enterprise system that will reverse climate change if we force them to do that and incentivize it. Help us with workforce development, rebuild our infrastructure. We gotta come together. We can't do this divided. It doesn't even make any sense. I mean, think about it. Does it make any sense to think we're going to address all of these challenges we have in the business community, in the venture capital, and the most creative, innovative risk takers on the planet are not going to be at the table? That doesn't even make any sense. I'm not, like I said, hostile to greed, hostile to income inequality, hostile to concentration of wealth. But we need to sit down with them and build this, and the workers, and build that new model.
So I work in healthcare, and I've lived in Texas, Louisiana, and now Iowa, and seen the devastating effects of privatization of medical care and the lack of women's care. And I know this is a two-pronged question, so you're welcome to only answer 50% of it. But there's always the question of privatization of the VA and the lack of women's health care that's occurring right now. And I just want to know your position on those items.
Two questions: women's health care and privatization of the VA.
Yes.
I'm against the privatization of the VA. I actually sit on the committee that funds the VA, and we've got some really interesting things going on in the VA. That's all right.
Welcome to presidential.
Yeah, just glad it wasn't mine. So I'm against privatization of the VA. We've got some really cool stuff happening in the VA today, and I've been pushing this for a long time, where we're really promoting and trying to scale up integrative care for veterans. We still today, which I think is a national tragedy, we have 20 vets take their own lives a day still today. And this has been something I've been trying to practice not since I've gotten to Congress. And integrative and alternative treatments have been seen to have a tremendous impact on these vets. And in fact, we'll be sharing a lot of this over the course of the next few months as we campaign. But we've seen practices like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, diet, nutrition, acupuncture. And I've sat with vets, Vietnam vets, and they have said things like, I wish I would have learned this 40 years ago. Some of these practices, they go from taking 15 or different prescription drugs a day down to 2. And I have a friend of mine who is a double amputee who was having post-traumatic stress. One of his friends said he needed to learn yoga. He learned yoga, and all his soldier buddies were making fun of him. And he basically healed himself from post-traumatic stress. Now he's a yoga teacher, and he's teaching other vets how to do yoga and heal themselves. What a low-cost alternative. So his name is Dan Nevins, and if you want to see the most emotional Now This story, check that out. And I'm going to bring Dan to Iowa, and he promised we would do some hot yoga with some vets in Iowa. So I'm here to do that. Yes, sir.
Congressman, for the past 45 plus years, the United States and Israel have been dealing with the Palestinians in a way that's ending up now with Mr. Netanyahu saying he's going to annex the West Bank, and with Israeli snipers killing children in Gaza. I wonder what, since our process as an honest broker hasn't worked, if you have some new ideas about how to approach this issue.
Well, first and foremost, obviously we have a really special relationship with Israel in that region, and a lot of partnerships, military partnerships and others that we have. I don't think it's a good idea for what Netanyahu is saying now about annexing. I don't think that's in the interest of the United States, and I don't think that's in anybody's interest. And it seems to me that this is a political comment, given the elections that are coming up in the next few days. I think it's the 9th. And I think he's making a political statement that will not, I don't think, have the support of many others other than to help him get through this election. I think the United States has been disengaged from the peace process, and I think it would be important for us to re-engage. We have a responsibility to be an honest broker. I don't think we should cede that responsibility. I think it's important for us. This obviously isn't the only issue in the world where we've lost some kind of moral high ground to be honest brokers in a variety of different issues, including Crimea, and dealings with Russia, and dealings with Saudi Arabia, dealings with China, because of a lot of different interests that may be entangling the White House. But I do think we can be and continue to be, and I think we need to be an honest broker in situations like that.
You're out.
Sorry. Sure.
Hi, I'm ACL, you rights for I'm an ACLU rights for and I'm an immigration attorney. And my clients who are immigrants are,
Real close.
my clients who are immigrants are hardworking and they want to take care of their families and they want to be safe. And what they're facing right now is denial of their rights, separation of families, and communities here in Iowa like close to being torn apart. And I want to know what your plan is to give those opportunities to immigrants.
You should repeat.
Appreciate that. It was a general question around providing opportunity for immigrants, and I think generally better treatment of immigrants. I'll tell you a quick story. Really good friend of mine. His name was Al Amr. He was from Jordan. He was Palestinian, and he was one of the first business people to go into downtown Youngstown. We were really trying to revitalize downtown Youngstown. And many, many years ago, he was the first one to go down. He took a risk. And he had an immigration issue that I had helped him with, that if you had a bill in Congress to support this person who was having some issues, they couldn't deport him. And so I did that a couple of congressional sessions. And he stayed in the United States. President Trump came in, and he got worried, he got scared. I was able to do it again in Congress. There's a bill, ICE does not deport. And President ICE went back on this long-standing tradition that if a member of Congress had an interest in a particular case, that we weren't going to deport him. Amr was supposed to be deported anyway. All of a sudden, the day he was supposed to leave the next day, I went news. I was making calls, get the news, he's going to stay. Youngstown went crazy because everyone knew him. Because he was the guy, so long downtown. And about 2 weeks later, he says, I got to go up to ice in Cleveland. I got my hearing. I think everything's okay. My lawyer thinks everything's going to be okay. He says, but can you come with me? So I meet him in Cleveland. We go to the ICE facility. Member of Congress, Amr, his wife, his attorney. We're there for a couple hours. It takes a while to get him. All of a sudden they said, hey, he's got to come in the back. Goes in the back. They take him and they put him in jail. And 2 weeks later, he's back in Georgia. Wife in Ohio, 3 daughters in Ohio, business in Ohio, did everything right, played by the rules, and this is how he was treated, with his member of Congress in the facility. I'm deeply committed. My great-grandparents came here from Italy. I remember growing up and going to the family parties and hearing broken English talking. I'm a product of immigrants, as most of us are. I think it is essential for our democracy. I think it's essential for our economy. And I will tell you this, I'm also for a strong border. I think we all are. I want to use technology. I don't think you could put a wall in the middle of the Rio Grande River. I don't think you want a eminent domain, rancher's property in southern part of the state. We have an opiate epidemic in Ohio. I certainly want to make sure drugs aren't coming in. And I'll be as firm on the border as anybody. But that doesn't mean you can't be for a compassionate, smart, economically viable immigration system in the United States. They are not mutually exclusive. By the focus on the wall, 90% of the drugs come in through the port of entries. We need more dogs and more border patrol. A lot of drugs come in through the water. So this distraction about the wall is fantasy. And I will be much tougher, and I will be much more successful on preventing drugs coming into the United States than Donald Trump has been. I can guarantee you that.
Loser teacher.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for coming. I've been following you for some time now on social media, and I have 2 questions. I'll make them short, so hopefully your answers don't have to be as long either. First, as a public school teacher, what is your stance on vouchers? Second, fully funding IDEA to the promised 40%.
Again, vouchers and more full funding of IDEA. And we know, too, that investments in our education system are critical. And when you invest into low-income students, and this is how we got to talk about it. We talk about it with regard to budgets. We're going to cut this, and it sounds like, okay, we're going to cut the budget. When you look at it as an investment, and that investments in the low-income students can get anywhere from a 10 to 15% return, because you can do the math as to success of the student by having a good quality education and the amount of money they'll pay back in taxes. I would say any business person would be pretty happy with a 10 to 15% return. Just say this quickly about education as well. First thing we've got to do in the United States, absolute first thing we have to do as a new modern education system, is take care of the kids. Many of these kids, over 50% of them, are low-income kids that go to our public schools. We've got to take care of their social and emotional needs, and we have learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than we have in the previous 200. And we know when a kid is traumatized that their brain doesn't function properly. If their brain doesn't function properly, if they're in fight or flight mode, that they actually can't access their prefrontal cortex, which is where your working memory is, where your attention span is and your ability to focus and concentrate and do what needs to be done in the classroom. So social and emotional learning will be a centerpiece of my education plan. And where social and emotional learning programs, robust ones, have been implemented, there's been an 11 percentile point increase in test scores, which closes the achievement gap. A 10% increase in good behavior, pro-social behavior, is what the academics call it. They say being a good kid. 10% decrease in antisocial behavior, 20% swing in the mood of the school, and we close the achievement gap because we deal with the kids' trauma and get the brain functioning at a really high level and add that to some better nutrition in the schools, and I think we're going to be on our way to really reforming the education system. Yeah.
Wealth gap between the 1% and everyone else. Do you have any ideas of how we can bring the bottom and even the middle class where they own more of the wealth?
Yeah, great question about the wealth gap. So the top 1% own 90% of the wealth in the country. And that is a recipe. We feel the economic effects day to day and the struggle of people who are just trying to make ends meet. It's an economic disaster waiting to happen too, high concentration of wealth. I do believe that some of these investments that I talked about around electric vehicles, around wind, around solar, can help get some of that wealth down into the workers. And we will have incentives in the tax code and in other places to make sure around productivity bonuses and profit sharing to make sure we're cutting workers in on the deal. Also around healthcare, college tuition. These are other ways for us to make sure that we can get wealth into the hands of working class people, increase those opportunities. I think that's really important. And I will say with some of the conversations happening today around increasing the rates on people who make 10 million plus a year or 50 million in wealth or whatever the question is, we can certainly sit down and figure out what those numbers are. I would be supportive of that, but I do want to say this. I think this is important for us to say this. We talked about the healthcare system, 2.5 times more than every other industrialized country to get worse results. Talk about the education system, and we see our math and science results internationally. We see what's happening with the environment and that broken system around the environment without any real strategy moving forward. No real strategy around an industrial policy when it comes to electric, solar, wind, additive. I don't like just asking people for money just to ask them for money. I think we have, and to dump that money into broken systems. I think we have to make the commitment, not just to the wealthy, but the middle class, hardworking taxpayers who pay a lot of money to the government, that we're going to get this doggone thing running efficiently and effectively. It's important. I think it's disrespectful, just as a principle, to say, hey, we just want your money because you're rich. We want your money because we are rebuilding new systems, of which your money is going to go into and help us take down China, not take them down, but compete and beat China economically, to lift the middle class, to rebuild the United States, to make sure every kid has access to a good education. There's a purpose for what we're doing. Yeah, I'm just going to get somebody new and then come back. Yep.
If you look at, this is tax month, tax day is coming up, less than 10 days. More than, for every $100, more than $50 of the discretionary budget is spent on the military. We have wars that have been going on longer than any other war and have no real end in sight, and produce the problems with vets that you spoke about earlier. The human cost, the dollar cost of military spending is apparently out of control and under the influence of the military-industrial complex. What would you do about that?
Defense Department wastes a lot of money. Does that surprise you? Probably not. I was just a part of a small project, putting pressure on a company and helping to get an investigation of a company called TransDigm. They did military contracts. Long story short, we thought they were bilking the taxpayer, and they were bilking the military for about $16 million, and we went after them. I think having a process in place where you go after these people who are cheating the taxpayer is critically important in the Department of Defense. I will say that the Iraq War has set us back financially almost for a generation because of the total cost of the war. All went on the credit card, and the veterans costs that we talked about earlier we're still paying for. A vet who is on 15 prescription drugs, or the kind of trauma and the amputees and all of that. But I've spent a lot of time in the last 16 years studying what's going on around the world. And I will tell you that Russia and China are intent on coming after us. China is a growing threat around the world. They are building islands in the South China Sea. They told President Obama they would never militarize them. 2 years later, there's bases on them. Flying planes all on and off of these new islands. They now have one base in Djibouti, Africa. They're building another one. They are signing long-term contracts for raw materials in Africa. They're buying off the local leaders, signing these long-term contracts for essential materials, essential minerals that are critical for this and other things that are really important to our satellites and our defense capabilities. They have an initiative called the Belt Road Initiative where they want to rebuild the old Silk Road. I saw a picture of it yesterday. They have a rail line that goes from northeast China all the way to the Czech Republic. They are building oil and gas lines into the Middle East. And they have designs for ports in a variety of countries. They are beating us in about 4 technologies that I'll have to figure out if I can mention exactly what they are, but they are beating us. They are killing us with 5G. We're stuck in 4G. And so my point is this. I don't want us wasting money when it comes to the military. But I will tell you, we have enemies that want to come and clean our clock and are working daily to be able to do that. And they have submarines, and they have planes, and they have money, and they're making a robust push. And Donald Trump has damaged and weakened us in the world. And as he's retreating the United States and the world, China is moving in. We should be developing economic ties in Asia. We should be developing economic ties in Africa. But they are now because we're retreating. And I think having a strong, efficient military is going to be important for us. I want that stuff, here's the last point, I want what we're doing and the technologies we're making, I want that made in the United States. I think we have to do a better job of having a defense industrial base here where that taxpayer money is actually being spent here in the United States.
We spend more than the next 7 countries combined, and that includes China, and the rest are all allies. We spend more in the United States than the next 7 countries combined. Come on.
I got you. There is waste. There are places to cut. There are systems we don't need. But I'm telling you, and I have deep respect for your opinion, I'm just saying personally, this is a serious threat that we don't talk about in the United States. And the president says, I'll just put some tariffs on China and it'll all go away. It ain't going away. And we cannot wake up. If we're going to be Democrats and we're going to get elected, and we're going to have to understand what's going on around the world, and we're going to have to take some tough positions. I come from one of the poorest congressional districts in the country. I want spending on education, healthcare, infrastructure, water, sewer. We got EPA overflow issues. There's not an economic challenge that my district doesn't have. That I would rather say, end this defense program and put it in Youngstown. I wish I could do that, but I would be lying to you. I'd be lying to you, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell everybody in this presidential election exactly how I feel and why I feel that way. And that's how I feel on these issues. We can do a better job of streamlining. We can probably eliminate a lot of programs, but at the end of the day, if we don't have a robust military, we are going to lose economically. And just read a couple articles about China and 5G and what they're doing. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to put in a plug for part of this whole plan, economic development and everything. It has to have a cybersecurity component.
Question?
I mean, you mentioned China, and I don't want to be all anti-Chinese or
No,
anything,
no, no.
but they are stealing from us. They are stealing our secrets. They are stealing our ideas, technology. I mean, you've got the Russians, like you mentioned, wanting to just undermine us and
Yeah.
just be disruptors.
Yeah.
And then you've got China, huge country, that's making all these different moves, and they are the ones, they have like totally reversed on their climate policies and going after these new technologies with the electric car, like
In
we
China?
talked about. Yes.
Yeah.
But they're stealing a lot of this from us, and they're vying to become a huge global leader. I mean, they are a global leader, but they're really trying to, take a lot away. But I just feel like we are under such, I mean, it isn't really discussed a lot, I don't feel like, but we have a big security problem. I mean, when other countries can take out our power grid and can disrupt our social media and all these other things, we don't have the presence. We have got to do more, and it is a part of all of this vision that you're talking
No
about.
question, and I thank you for reminding me, because cyber is a huge piece of it. And just, we can think of it this way. When we started as a country, we had, guns and bullets. Then you get guns and bullets and trucks and tanks. Then you get guns and bullets and trucks and tanks, and then Roosevelt wanted a Navy. We got a Navy. It's important for our security. Then we needed an Air Force. You know how much it costs? I asked the Air Force, head of the Air Force the other day, how much it costs to train one Air Force pilot? Any guess? Anybody got a guess? Because I had no clue.
It's $1 million.
$10 million to train one pilot to run that sophisticated computer in the sky. So then we had an Air Force, then we had missiles. We had to have short, mid, and long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles. Then we had satellites, so we had to dominate, or at least control space. Then, then we had to go into nuclear, which is probably a place we could save a lot of money. We don't need to be able to blow up the world 500 times. So we could that's probably a great place where we could probably save a lot of money. Then we come into then we go nuclear, right? And then now we're in cyber. So we've got to hire thousands of people, and it's not just like it's Russia and China. It's also Iran and North Korea, who could just have like 1,000 people just running at us. Not just the government, but our banks, our power companies, serious stuff, of which we're a partner. So we had to hire a bunch of people to do that. The war on terror was the mistake. That's where the money went. We're like, if we did not go to Iraq, we would have enough money to do all of this. And then after that, now it's AI and artificial intelligence and all of this. And now it's Huawei and 5G, and this gets really, really complicated. And it sucks. I mean, it really does. It's a burden. But what I'm saying is we have a concentration of wealth. We're generating a lot of wealth in the United States. We can still make the investments we need to make in the things that will keep us competitive so we can beat China economically, not just with the military.
Maybe one last question.
Sure.
I'll make it a tough one.
There you go. Next, who else wants to go?
You've been grilled pretty good. Can we be specific? What's the thought?
Well, one of the things I'm for, and this is obviously, I think it starts as a failure of investments into our education system, because if you are not educating your kids, if you're not providing opportunity for your kids, then the next natural step is they end up in the criminal justice system. We see, I believe it's men from the age of 28 to 33, 30% of them that have not had a high school, that do not have a high school degree, 30% end up in prison. If you have a high school degree, it's 10%, and if you have a college degree, it's 2%. So getting kids engaged and getting them through high school would be a big part of that. I am also for the legalization of marijuana. I think that's an important step because basically, I've got kids and I this is a tough one because you got kids and you don't want it to signal to them that somehow we want them drinking and smoking pot. It's not what we want. But the reality of it is that it is a systemic racial issue where 4 times as many African Americans end up in prison around marijuana crimes, which is a racist system that we have to fix. And I believe legalization can be a big a part of that. But making sure we spend this money on the front end in the education system to ultimately prevent this stuff from happening.
Thank you.
I'll hang out and we'll circle back. No, I heard I got a meeting to you about 18 more times before I get your vote. So talk in the morning.
If you'd like a picture, we're going to do a line right here. I think the congressman's going to talk to the press a little bit, so give us a few minutes. But if you're interested